to Solomon. The Solomon lived around 960. These are attributed to Solomon. The Solomon lived around 960. The book of Song of Solomon was written around 250, and Ecclesiastes in 160. And the book of Proverbs, also attributed to Solomon, was written, and we're going to be discussing that really in depth later on, was written between 600 and 200 before the Christian era. Now that's 400 years. The book of Ecclesiastes is 160. Song of Solomon is 250. Yeah, Proverbs is 600 to 200. All of them attributed to this one man, King Solomon, who lived around 960. And we're going to get into depth on this stuff about the Proverbs here and who really wrote them. The book of Psalms, which they say is the Psalms of David, and that's a favorite book among black people. Black people love the Psalms. And it's fitting that you should. You'll find out why as we go on in our studies. David lived about 1000. But the books of the Psalms, or Psalms as they were all Psalms there, was compiled between 500 and 100 before the Christian era. David lived about 1000. The book of Psalms was compiled over a period of 400 years between 500 and 100. The book of Ezra, who lived about 444 BCE, where did we come in contact with his name before in our study? And we came up with the name Ezra. He was a scribe. What did he do? He compiled the book of Genesis and other books of the Bible. We're going to come back to that, don't worry. Ezra the scribe, and Ezra lived about 444, but the book of Ezra was written in 250. And finally, this is just a few I'm sharing with you, the book of Esther. Esther lived under the Persian domination, under Xerxes, Artaxerxes, Xerxes the king, which we'll be talking about in detail at another time. But she lived during 470, around 470. The book of Esther was not written until 125. It was a romance novel. And they were fighting among themselves as to whether they were going to put it as sacred writing or not. And finally, after many years of struggling over it, they said, this is a part of the Holy Bible. I'm bringing this out, as I said, not to attack anything, please understand, but to show you how it happened. Because we are under the impression that God spoke, man wrote. I heard one woman stand up and say, and I would never attack that because I don't bother with anybody's belief. You need what you need to carry you through. I respect that. See, I believe it from Genesis to Revelations. That I understand and that I don't understand. I believe it. Well, that's all right. But you should at least know and understand what you believe. But I would not fight with my brothers and sisters about it. Say, bless you, sister, just so what you believe makes you love me. And us get together as a people and move on up in the world. It really doesn't matter to me. Let's talk about the captivity here a minute, because this thing says it happened in a comparatively late date, that they started giving the names of these books to their outstanding people in their history. And I mentioned before the reason why they did it. They were being removed from their history. They were surrounded by a hostile environment. So they needed now to invoke and call up the great men out of their past. We do it whenever we come and pray and have libation. We're invoking the spirits of our ancestors. This was one of their ways. They didn't intentionally mean to mislead anybody. This is one of their ways of invoking the spirit of Moses, the spirit of Daniel, the spirit of Ezra, and all like that. In 586, which you've written down before, in 586 before the Christian era, the Babylonians, under Nebuchadnezzar. Don't worry about that name now, because we're going to deal with that in detail in the future. But Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and you read that in the book of Daniel, Daniel 1, Daniel 2, and all through there, came in and conquered the remains of the nation of Judea, the ancient Israelites, and took them off into slavery, captivity, burned down their capital, Jerusalem. And there they stayed until the Persians came and took power. This is Babylon in 586. Then Persia conquered Babylon, and naturally when they conquered Babylon, inherited all of Babylon's possessions, they also inherited Babylon's slaves as well. That's the first time they were ever in slavery. There's no record of them being in slavery in Egypt. And I'm going ahead of myself though. There's no record of that anywhere. The Babylonians took them in, the Persians inherited them, and the Greeks, that's when they really became degenerate. They were able to hold up pretty good until those Greeks got them in 331. When those Greeks got them, they degenerated. That's when homosexuality and other things started coming in. The Greeks, and we're going to do a whole study on those one day, the Greeks were something. Whenever they hit a place, whenever they came in contact with Africa, it was all over for the Africans. You can believe that. Yeah, everybody, before they finished, everybody was switching. And look, let me apply this to our day. In some places, in some cities, especially where they're strong, it's hard for blood to get a job. Unless he's wimpy, at least wimpy if he ain't switching. Because he has to have the mark of the beast, which is you got to act like him. But I'm not going into that now. That's another subject all to itself. Greeks are devastating. When you get in them schools, don't get in them Greek-lettered organizations. I have to do a little commentary here right now. Come on, bro. When you get into them Greek-lettered organizations where you have to pledge and all these undignified things you have to do to pledge, that comes out of the filth and degeneration, the degradation of the Greek tradition. You ain't no Greek. That's right. I pledged for this and I pledged for this. What? That's right. You're not in here for all of that. You're in here to get the knowledge, whatever this institution can deliver up, because it's a key to getting back. You know you can't get it all in. You cannot get it all in here because they don't keep it all in here, what they teach you. The real stuff they keep put away. They enrich white folks' libraries and collect. That's right. But you know you need this to get through the gate. So get that, but stay away from all that. Sororities and fraternities, you stay away from that. Now, if you want to do a little undercover work and just hook up with something so that you can have the benefits because they have a cliquish thing, but there's no way, when I was in school, there's no way I was going to hook up with that. You ain't going to have me eating this and running down this, and you pat me, somebody hit me, I'm going to hit him back. Hitting me with no paddle and tying something around my head and letting me walk on Fright night. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm a dignified being. I don't do that. But that is the way of subduing, the pecking order. Subduing you under, well, it's all in fun. Don't you have good sportsmanship? No. Not anybody taking advantage of me. But there's a whole history to that, how that's hooked up in homosexuality and Harvard University and Oxford University. Another subject. This is the captivity they were under that was so bad. The Greek. And at that time, a lot of writing started coming out on the literature. They couldn't do anything else, so they started writing. They just started writing and revising and calling up the times, periods out of their history when they had greatness. So this is one of the ways that the Bible came about, and giving you some idea on when it was written. Now, I think I have another document relating to that. Document 40. That's right. I jumped on you, didn't I? Jumped time on you. The first 5 books of the Bible, known as the Pentateuch, 5 books, words introduced by the Septuagint. Oh, here we go. Got another word. Got to put some more ingredients in the cake. Ascribed by tradition to Moses as the inspired author. I know I'm restating myself, but I just brought out a new fact. That Moses may have received assistance. Now check this out. This is the European view of things. This is from the New Index Bible, Dixon Publishing Company. It says that Moses may have received assistance from others or made use of records that had come down to him pertaining to his people and other matters, would in no sense militate against the Mosaic authorship of the doctrine or the doctrine of inspiration. Why not? Say now Moses may have gotten it from somewhere else. He may have learned it from other people, but that doesn't mean that God didn't give it to him on Mount Sinai. Now wait a minute, either he did or he didn't. Let's say this will be admitted by all conservative scholars. Conservative scholars are called fundamentalists. The Bible is the Word of God. It came directly from God. Every word in it is directly from God. Every I dotted, every T crossed, every word in it is powerful. All you have to do is speak it and change what. If that was so, black people would have the most wonderful communities in the world. Every Sunday morning that you stood up and read it, we should see a transformation. As I said, I'm not picking on it. I'm just trying to take things out of the realm of fantasy and put them into the realm of reality. Because when you're in a fantasy, your head is in the clouds. So the man beating on your behind, you are not able to deal with. Because you're dealing with something that is not. So that's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to deprive you of your faith or your belief or anything. Saying, in your believing of it, understand what that really means. There's more depth to what you believe than we realize. There's so much about our ancient tradition that we still practice and don't know that we're practicing. And because we don't know we're practicing, we don't know the power that's in it, so you cannot get the fullness out of it. Now, after this study, you should be able to go into the Bible and pull the power out that's in there for you, that you originally put in there. But you need the keys to go in and unlock. That the Honorary Elijah Muhammad and others gave me, start giving me some keys. Beautiful time to live in. All the time. Beautiful time to live in. Now, I brought up some words that I had better start dealing with. Septuagint means 70. That's all, 70. It's the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. Now, this is when Europeans start translating African languages. Hebrew was an African language. We'll talk about that when we get into the languages that the Bible came out of, because it did come out of the Cushite languages, Ethiopic first, then it went through the Egyptian languages, then it went through the Hebrew languages, because Hebrew, Egyptian, Ethiopic, all of them came from the same family of languages, called the Bantu. Don't worry about that now, we're going to come back. I'm just mentioning it. Hebrew was an African language. Now the Greeks are going to translate an African language that is far older than any Greek. They're going to now before the Greeks could speak good, this language was being spoken. I'm serious. Yes, sir. They state that themselves. They're going to translate the scriptures. This is not all of it now. They're going to take the books of the Bible, originally organized into 24, and make them 39 of the Old Testament. And don't worry about that point either, because we're going to have that detail. I just raise issues. So don't get confused. I will raise them, or I'll come back and deal with them in depth later. I'll raise them because they're related to the point we're trying to make. But we want to finish the point we're working on now, because it's easy to get scattered. In the year 270, before the Christian era, Ptolemy Philadelphia.
Right.
Greek. Now, Greek, Syrian Greek, with a mixture up there. During the Greek domination over the Hebrews and other portions of the world, they had now invaded Africa and just turned it upside down. In the city of Alexandria, which is a city they named after Alexander, which was an original African city and had nothing to do with him. In the city of Alexandria, they had torn down an African city and then built Alexandria on top of it. He decided to collect all the great literature from around the world because he was so inspired by the remnants of African literature and books that was left there. He decided now is the time for the Greeks to come into their own. We will now send around the world and collect up all this literature that we can claim as ours in this city of Alexandria. One of the bodies of literature he wanted was the Hebrew, Old Testament. And he called in 70 Hebrew scholars under the supervision of 2 others. Each 70 of them were put in separate rooms and began to translate from Hebrew to Greek. The problems that they ran into was there was not enough Greek words to match the Hebrew words. And that is where mistranslation of the Bible began. Because they had to use what was available. You may have heard me mention this before in one of my lectures, particularly in the one on Jesus, the married life of Jesus and his son Barabbas, where I talk about the fact that the word virgin, when the Greeks ran across the word, what later became known as virgin, when they ran across it in the Hebrew, this is to give you an example. And just one of the problems they had, you could think of the countless problems they had in all those books of the translation. This is just give you one primary example. They ran across the word Alma and Bethula. Both of the words became the English word virgin. One meant a young woman who had had relationship with a man but had never been married. The other meant a young woman who had never been touched by a man at all. Sometimes the word Alma meant simply young woman. The Greeks only had one word for virgin, parthenos. Which meant a woman who had never been touched, a virgo intacta, as the Latins call it. So they said, well, we only have one word, we'll use what we have. So now you have, in Isaiah the 7th chapter and the 14th verse, behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. The original Hebrew says, behold, an Alma shall conceive, a young woman who has had relationships, shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. Not a Bethula will have a son, one who has never been touched, because one who has never been touched cannot have a son. Because there are certain things in the universe that, well, God can do anything. True, but he doesn't usually tamper with the laws of nature. Especially one that has been so long established. And that is sacred within itself. Which is sacred and divine. So why would he tamper with that? No, Europeans tamper with that because they needed that because of their sick outlook on human sexuality. They had a warped outlook. But that's another subject. They really did.
Yes, sir.
No, you should hear what they had to say about women, man. I don't know if you women would like the New Testament as much. When I get finished telling you what them early church fathers that wrote that New Testament had to say about you. You were the gateway to hell, man, destruction. That's what they said about women. That's because Europeans have problems with women. But let's get back to this one. So they had one word. That's the one they use. So here you are walking around today. I mean, there are whole institutions built off of it.
Yes, sir.
$1 billion institutions built on it. People have gone to war and fought with each other and drawn blood over as to whether she has this child or not without the help of a man. I mean, they have actually killed each other. Because somebody made a mistake in translation.
Right.
Think about that. Some of the simplest things can evoke the worst passion and the emotions of men. Simple. The Greeks didn't have enough words, and the world is still suffering.
Yes, sir.
Today. That's just one example. That's why you have to put this book back. Oh, if the Lord let me live long enough, I plan to do a whole translation back into the original language. Now, that means my children are going to have to be up and grown because I'm going to have to go in there somewhere and not come out. And my children are not going to have that. I cannot even go in my study in peace anymore. Then you have to give them that time. But I would love to do that translation, or a group of us or something, do that one day. But if we don't do it, you do it.
Yes, sir.
We lay it before you. You are the scholars of the future. You are to carry this on. I hope you're not just sitting in here learning this. You're going to teach this. Yeah, you. But I ain't no yes you are. You have 20 billion brain cells up there. Who said you can't use yours like everybody else does? Dr. So-and-so this, and I ain't got nothing over on you. You just, there's some research. You do some research. That's what we're trying to do. Give you those tools to do research with. We'll do it on your... It's fascinating, too. You just love it. Well, I have one more thing to mention here on this as to why Moses could not have written the Pentateuch, Genesis, Numbers, Leviticus, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And that's in Deuteronomy the 34:5. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab. Now wait a minute. According to the word of the Lord, and he buried him in the land of Moab, over against Beth Peor. But no man knoweth of his sepulchre unto this day. Now Moses could not have written that. That's an obituary. Now some of us write our obituaries, but not that exact. So obviously some other people were writing about that at the time. Tradition also accredits Moses with writing the book of Job. Right? Tradition says that Moses wrote the book of Job. And when you read the book of Job, it does parallel Genesis, but then we cannot prove that Moses wrote Genesis either. But one thing about the book of Job that it does is this. It gives you some answers, particularly in Job, the 38th chapter. Write this down. The first, let's read it quickly. And it gives you some answers and parallels to the book of Genesis. Job, the 38th chapter, and the first verse. Okay, I'm moving so fast here. Book of Job, the 38th chapter, and the first verse. And one of the reasons why I want to read this to you is to bring out another important fact in the history of African people and the eternalness of African people. Okay, 38th chapter and the first verse. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, the 5th verse, who hath laid the measures thereof? Who knoweth, or who hath stretched the line upon it, talking about the earth? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? The 7th verse, this is the key verse I want. When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now this is the Creator talking to Job about the creation of planet Earth. He says, where were you when I laid the foundation and stretched it out? When all the morning stars sang for joy, and the sons, plural, of God. The sons of God shouted for joy. What does that mean? Let's go to Hebrews now. The first chapter, the first to the second verse, the book of Hebrews in the New Testament. The first chapter gives us a key. The first chapter, the first to the second verse. Hebrews is behind Timothy, yes. First chapter, the first and the second verse. God, who had sundry times and in divers manners, spake in times past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son. Now he's using it in the singular, but check this. Whom he has appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the world. Here we have now a combination of thoughts between the two texts. Whoever wrote the book of Job had the knowledge. Morning stars sang. This is literal now. Sang. Sons of God rejoice. World. All right. Let's start with the word world. Comes, as used in the New Testament, comes from the Greek word O-I-K-O-U-M-E-N-E. Okamene. 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 What does it mean? Inhabitable places. So the word worlds here means what? Places inhabited by others. So the sons of God, and you must understand what the term son of God means. We'll go into it in more detail, but let me just state it later on in one of these documents. But let me state this, that it meant not the genetic child of God, the creative force, but representative of a nation, of a collective of people, is what it meant, because all African peoples believe that their ultimate ruler and king was the divine Lord of the universe, and that their kings or governors ruled only by the will of the Creator, and that he was responsible to the Creator and the people. Therefore, he was a son of God. That's what the son of Horus. Horus is one of the representatives of the Creator. Horus, one of the gods. Now, you must understand the difference between God and God. God is spelled with apology because it means Lord. God, as you see it in the scripture, is from, we'll deal with the word later, we're going to get wrapped up in the Yahweh, or Amun-Ra, or whatever. There's so many names, and that's another foolishness for black people to get caught up in. Well, it's Jehovah or it's Allah. Well, you crazy. They both mean the same thing. And then you stand out in the street fussing over it. White folks running the world, and you stand out in the street. One's got the white cow and the other's got this one in each other's face. It's Allah, it's Jehovah, it is not his business. Oh, will you stop? I know the Creator is reasoning and pain. Will you please stop it? What's important is what I can do for you. But sons of God, therefore, meant representatives. Now, Adam was supposed to be the first son, as the scripture says, according to this story. Adam, and we're just going to deal with it now. We're not going to go into the historicity of it or anything. Just for the sake of argument and for a point of reference now, Adam is, according to the biblical story, the first man on earth. Therefore, the first son of God, representative on earth. If he's representing the earth, who is these other cats? Sons of God. Rejoicing, that means their place of inhabitation, their inhabited worlds, their okonomine, has already existed. While this one is being created, because they up there singing and blowing like trains. Johnny Carter. Because the Creator is creating a new world. They jamming. They happy. A new world is coming into being. The Creator stepped out on space, is that beautiful piece by James Weldon Johnson. And God stepped out on space. Steps out on space and hurls that black power into the universe. So they start blowing, and all this comes into being. This is what they, so they already exist. And the morning stars sang. What is the planet Venus called? Because it is seen most brightly in the morning. Now, can I go into detail on that? We're going to touch on it down the road again. But you are obviously not confined to this earth alone. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and other teachers have taught you this. The mothership. I'm not going to say it anymore. It all ties in, brothers and sisters. That's why I'm saying, don't argue about the details, because everybody has a piece that is essential to the total whole. I wish I could go into that. No, I don't want to get away from that subject. Let that go. If there is no mothership, why they spend all that money out there in Colorado building this place to receive extraterrestrial beings? Why are they doing that? If there is no mothership. Praise be unto the messenger and all teachers who have come to our midst. I appreciate every black man and black woman who ever brought anything about it. They had their strengths, they had their weaknesses. They had their faults, they had their good points. All humans do. But I'm not going to get caught up in the faults. I'm going to be caught up in the good stuff and the messenger stuff. Now, the messenger was the granddaddy of it. God for our time. So then you must always respect that. Don't let nobody be taught that try to make you talk against that. That's right. All right, let me get on back now. Close this document out. Started something. Moses was, we'll go into details of the story, but I always liked the story because I felt sorry for the brother. He was doing good. He was in a successful sheep herding business with his father-in-law. He might have had both wives at that time. He was doing good, man. He was a sheik. He was a desert sheik. He didn't have to worry about nothing. And he come walking along, minding his business, tending his sheep, and there's nothing to do but a burning bush. Bang! And there began, as the Honorable Marcus Garvey says, and there began my doom to be a race leader. His people took him through more hell than Pharaoh did. We're ready to go to document 11. Moses is an Egyptian rather than a Jewish name. Aha! Perhaps it is a shorter form of Atmos. Professor Gostang of the Marston expedition of the University of Liverpool claims to have discovered in the royal tombs of Jericho evidence that Moses was rescued precisely in 1527 BCE. Impossible. Let's talk about that. By the then princess, later the great Queen Hatshepsut, that he was brought up by her as a court favorite and fled from Egypt under the ascension of her enemy Thutmose. Story of Civilization, Volume 1, page 302 by Will Durant. Now, let me investigate that, because even though he gave us some good information, there's some misleading information in there. Moses was not born during the time of Queen Hatshepsut, that great and beautiful, magnificent woman, because Moses was not born until 1320 before the Christian era. How do you know that, Ishakamusa? My Bible tells me so. Let's go into Exodus, the first chapter, and the 11th verse. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them. As I told you, we're going to deal with this historically another time, in another document. We're just going to deal with the story right now. Set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burden, and they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. Ramses did not come on the scene until the 1300s. And the cities of Pithom and Ramses was not built until the days of Setai I. And Setai I. And Setai I was reigning between 1321 and 1300 before the Christian era. 1321, 1300. Setai I. And I'm going to be showing you some pictures of him later on, so you'll know for sure who he was. And the storehouse city, that was the 19th dynasty during that period. You want to make a note of that. And there is no contemporary record of the Hebrews being slaves. We'll go into that in detail later, because that was an Egyptian system. They didn't have a slave system. This would put the birth of Moses occurring 80 years before the Exodus. Now, the Exodus took place in 1240 before the Christian era. That's when they either left on their own or were thrown out. One or the other. Because even black Hebrews, please don't get off in my African Israelite brothers and sisters, back then would sometimes side with Asians. They would side with their territorial roots many times rather than their racial roots. If the Asians, now coming down here to, let me show it from over here. Excuse me for reaching over you, my sister. No disrespect intended. And the Asians would come down out of Asia so they could try to get a piece of Africa. They always used Palestine or the land of Canaan as a bridge. Well, naturally, the Israelites, when they did establish a nation, was sitting right in the middle. So every time somebody, and when the Africans decided to go after the Asians, they would always be beating on the Hebrew. He caught flack. Either way it went, sitting in the middle. It was a very prosperous land because it was the gateway to trade around the world. Whenever the Asian would come down and he was in the ascendancy, the original African Israelite would be prone to side with the Asian, who was his natural enemy now. But you see us do that. Well, I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. Siding with the white folks against black folks. Well, I ain't going to vote for Jesse because I don't think he can do it. I want to go with Bernie. Same thing exists. And if his African brother was in the ascendancy, he was pro-African. Now, he was African all in all, but he was wishy-washy African. Some like some bloods you know today. If black is popular, they would even stand up and say, I was black once. Now, this is a man black as that. He's darker than the sky with no stars, at 1 a.m. And he's saying, I was black once. So, well, brother, when was that? But that kind of concept existed. So they were like that when the Asian was in the ascendancy. So if there was some persecution of them, it was probably justified because Ramsey said, now when the enemy comes in, they're going to fight with him. Because they did tend to do that, even as African Israelites. Now there's weaknesses as well as strengths among our people. That doesn't mean I'm attacking the African Israelites or the original Hebrew Israelites because I identify with them. I'm not attacking, I'm just stating in history. We have done good, we have done bad. Now if we did all good, we'd have never gotten this mess. So we must have did some messing up somewhere. A whole lot, because there's nobody supposed to suffer like we had. Well, that's the period in those treasure cities, those storehouse cities, and that is when Moses was born at that time. So even though Professor Garstein, who went digging over there, dug up Jericho and said he found, nobody saw it. He claims to have found a record that says that Moses was born during the days of Tacitus. But not this Moses, another Moses maybe, because you're going to find out in a minute, a lot of Moses. Just as there was a lot of Jesus. But not this one, because he had to be born. If he was being born, as the scripture said, during the building of the city of Ramses in Patan, then it had to be during the time of Setai I, which it was. Now, there are many fundamentalist Christians who will argue that point to the max. They actually believe that was during that time. So say, look, I'm not going to get an emotional argument. Here is the fact. You can do with them what you will. The name Moses is a surname, or just a part of a name. It's not a total name. In fact, and I'm going to come on this again, everyone that was baptized, not in the days of Jesus, everyone that was baptized back, all the way back from 18,000 BCE up into and including the time of Jesus, was called Moses, because he had been cleansed of the water, born again. That terminology, born again, goes way back because he had completed his initiation, the 10 steps of virtue, which we will cover in another seminar, that you had to pass before you could even get in the school. That's how heavy the school was that Africa had created, that all the knowledge that the world claims now came out of. These are 10 things you had to master before you could get in. And then you became an initiate, which all the prophets out of history had to do, including Jesus. You know Moses did it because he was born and raised there in Africa, in Kemet, what they call Egypt. And when he had passed his test and had mastered the 9 books of THEOLOGIAN, we'll talk about that later, he was baptized and came up out of the water a new man, for he had gained new knowledge. And then he received the appellation of Moses. It could have been Moses, which meant born of the soul. It could have been Moses, meaning born of the moon. It could have been Moses, born of the water. Twice. Because this story of a person being found in the bulrushes in the water is a whole African tale. We're going to talk about that in depth as we move on. Another similar name is Tutmos. Tutmos 1, Tutmos 2. So there was a lot of Moses. Because there was a lot of folks who had graduated from school. And back then, you didn't go to school 4 years and get your bachelor's degree, and 2 years and get your MA, and 2 years and get your doctor. No. 47 years to get the whole thing. Yes. That's why they was walking on water and stuff. But there were stages of graduation you had, and the initiation was one of the stages. You passed through and received the title Moses. That is what it was. All right, brothers and sisters, we have completed that. I'm going to read this document just this one time as a review, because I think it sums up so well all of the material we covered there, because the document released us into 11 or 12 different facts. That document from 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro or Black Man, and you of course have your resource book there if you want to read along with me, document 1 by Joel A. Rogers, page 49. The Bible really originated in ancient Egypt, which we found out as well, in Africa, where the population, according to Herodotus and Aristotle, and we talked about these two Greek scholars, was black. When they saw the folks, the inhabitants of that land, they were black people. Here, the Jews received almost all of their early culture. Professor Breasted, leading Egyptologist, says the right social and moral development of mankind in the Nile Valley, which is 3,000 years older than that of the Hebrews, contributed essentially to the formation of Hebrew literature. Our moral heritage, therefore, derives from a wider human past, enormously older than the Hebrew, and has come to us rather through the Hebrews than from them. So what that document told us, that's one in your resource paper, document 1. What page is document 1 on, my brother? Page 2. Oh, Amazing Facts is page 49. Page 9, number 49. I'm sorry, page 9, number 49. So what we have here, basically, what we've studied, is that the Bible, there was no written literature in the world until that which was developed by the African in the Nile Valley. And he used what in Latin they call papyrus, which we call in our mother tongue comma, and it was a reed which grew on the Nile Valley. They made paper out of. They were the first to make paper, the first to make ink, the first to produce any kind of writing material whatsoever. Therefore, if they were the first to produce writing, no one could produce a Bible or any kind of literature until that was done. It had to come from the African first. Why did it have to come from the African? Because in our studies of history, and it is verified by white scholars as well as black scholars, and white scholars were verifying it while we were enslavement to them. They had this knowledge in their libraries that we were the first people on earth, and we were the inventors and the foundation of all culture and science in the world from which developed religion. Because we understood, as Dr. Williams told us, before you can study anything about African people, you must first study their religion. And the basis of African religion was predicated on one supreme principle out of which grew all of the other doctrines. And that principle was inscribed on temple walls from one end of the heartland of Africa to the other end, all along the Nile Valley. That principle was, that you would have them do unto you. That is the basis for every good religion. You wouldn't need religion. You wouldn't even need civil government if you did not have to keep people directed and disciplined to the fact that you must be able to deal in a social environment. You wouldn't need any of that if you lived by yourself. Since we do not live by ourselves, there has to be those things which regulate how we deal with one another. The highest moral system that has ever been developed in the history of the world is inscribed on the ancient temples and pillars now in the Nile Valley of what they misnomer Egypt, of ancient Kemet. And from these that Moses, who was the first Bible writer, began his fragment to write. From this knowledge, and we're going to be talking about that in detail later, we found also that the Bible is a what? What is it? A collection of books. And it took over 1,000 years to compile it. Contrary to the image we're given, God spoke, man wrote. You say, write this, they found it, and wrote it. It didn't happen that way. And that many of the books in the Bible that have the names of prophets were not in fact written by them, but written by other people, because it was a tradition in those days to name your writings or dedicate your writings to the great men of your nation, your people. So that's how the Bible came about. One of the ways the Bible came about. We also studied it has gone through so many translations that the original African languages in which it was written could not be fully understood by Europeans when they began to translate those.